Ok, Fred, muchas gracias por estar en el canal, bienvenido. Bueno, yo sé que es una extensa hoja de vida de su trabajo, por lo cual es magnífico. Quisiera preguntarle sobre dos producciones, una muy querida que es su debut en The Brain Ledge y la otra que es favorita en Latinoamérica, Sniper Special Ops.
One of your first, or maybe the first, the English, and also one of his favorites and Latin America favorites that is Sniper Special Ops. We got the amazing Tina Bell here, so it's great to talk with the man behind the camera in both productions.
Two very different films. Well, the Brain Leeches was a film that I made when I first got out of school. I was a broadcast engineer, and I went to work for PBS, which is a public television's TV station. And when I went to television, they had a 16 millimeter news department, and they had an old camera. And the camera would record the sound on a magnetic stripe that was attached to the movie film, kind of like Super 8 sound. And that's how they would record interviews back then, because they didn't have mobile video cameras. So they'd go out with a 16 camera and they would record the audio onto the film. Then they would process it and then play it at the 11 o'clock news. And they had just bought a new camera that did the same thing, which was a CP16 camera. So they had retired the old camera. So it was sitting there and they weren't using it. And in the refrigerator, they had all this old black and white film that was expired. And it was like almost 9 years old. And I wasn't in that department. I was an on-air director. And I was doing, we did like, Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood and Sesame Street and things like that. But I wanted to be a filmmaker. So I said, hey, can I borrow that camera on the weekend? And they said, yeah. I said, can I have that film? Because it was black and white. Nobody wanted it. We were working in color. And they said, okay. So I took the film, and it was just enough, I thought, to maybe make a movie. And so I took the camera, and I took the film on the weekends, and I could record the sound right onto the film. So I didn't need a sound recorder. I just needed somebody to hold the microphone. And I made this movie. It was terrible, but I was making a movie, So I somehow, I used some rubber ants I bought in a store, and I made my wife appear in it. And I made my little baby, which was Chris Ray. And I had to appear in it myself. I mean, I didn't have any actors. I used people who lived in the apartment building where I lived. And I used a Bolex 16 millimeter camera. And, I just made this little movie. It wasn't a great film, but, at least I was making a movie. And then during the week, I worked in the TV station. So, I mean, that was the Brain Leeches. $298 was all it cost to make. It was literally the cost of the processing. That was all I paid for, whatever it cost to process the film, and I cut it together myself. So I think I made a profit on it, and actually pretty good. That did pretty good film for that. And I became a filmmaker. Sniper was a film that it came right on the end of a movie called The Christmas Present, which was a Lifetime Christmas movie that I made with Michelle Trachtenberg. And it was very strange because most of the Christmas movies are about 12 days. And this was 16-a-day movie. And I said, why so many days? They said, well, Lifetime, the contract says it must be 16 days. I said, okay, but this movie doesn't need 16 days. And they said, yeah, then 2 weeks from now, though, you have to start the Steven Seagal movie. And I said, that's 14 days later. I said, only 14 days to prepare for Steven Seagal. They said, yes. And I said, well, how long on the Steven Seagal movie? They said, only 14 days to shoot it. So I said, I get 16 days on a Christmas movie that I don't need. And I got 14 days to blow up the world with Steven Seagal. They said, yeah. So I had to write that movie for Seagal, and they didn't have a story. They had Steven Seagal, and they said, can you come up with something that can be done with him for one day? And I said, it would be better if you had him for 2 days, but I could maybe do one day. And they said, oh, we'll get him for 2 days. I said, okay. So I watched a DVD set of a TV series called Combat with Vic Morrow from the 1960s, because I knew they were Army stories, but I knew they didn't have a big budget. So I knew the shows had to be a plot. They had to be about something. They had to be about people. So I said, let me look at some of those. And then I remembered a Roger Corman movie called Battle of Blood Island, which was made in Puerto Rico when they made Creature from the Haunted Sea. And it was about 2 guys on an island, and one guy was paralyzed. The other guy had to look after him after the Japanese, they had a battle. So I said, okay, that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to make Steven Seagal the guy who has to look after a guy who's paralyzed from taking a bullet to the spine during a firefight in the opening of the movie. And then from Combat, there was a story I saw on the Combat TV series about a truck that had broken down with ammunition on it that was stuck, and they were waiting for people to come rescue them, which was also the story of a movie called Tank Battalion that American International Pictures had done in the 1950s, where they had one tank. So they broke down, they were waiting. So I took all of this stuff together and I made a story. And I said, listen, guys, you don't have enough money to blow up the world, but I'll give you a gunfight at the beginning, one in the middle, and one at the end. So at the beginning, there's a big gunfight and the guy gets paralyzed. And the guys want to go back, but they can't go back. They won't let them go back until they find out that there's a truck that's broken down with ammunition on it. So they send the guys out to get the truck. And then, of course, they find out that this guy's daughter's on it, and they get pinned down. And then they take the daughter to trade her off. And then there's a big fight at the end of the movie. So that was kind of Sniper. And I thought it turned out pretty well, considering Steven Seagal. He worked 2 days, but we show up till 11 in the morning, and he'd leave at 5. So and then lunch was in there. So you only had him for 5 hours a day. So I thought he put in 1 day's work. It took him 2 days to put in 1 day of work. And so I thought it turned out pretty well. And it was very successful financially for the people who made the film, who financed the film. It was a very successful movie.
No, more than a question, I'm so happy because you directed one of my favorite movies ever. For me, it's the most, I don't know if the word is sensual movie ever, but I became a man watching Possessed by the Night. I think it's one of the most beautifully shot movies and all the genres. I mean, it's softcore, but it's also horror. So yeah, I want to tell you that. And why do you think that? I want to say I know you keep directing erotic thrillers, but why they don't make it like The Good Days? And I mean, I wanna tell you, it's one of my favorites, and of course Matthews, but Possessed by the Night is my favorite movie from you. So I want to tell you that. And why do you think they don't make those erotic thrillers like The Old Days?
It's funny because my autobiography is coming out in about 21 days. And I'm going to use this to promote it. There it is.
Yeah. Jhon, esa es la autobiografía de él. I'm telling Jhon that this is the first time that you're showing your autobiography.
Yes,
Jhon.
That's right. And nobody has a copy yet, but Joe Dante has a copy. But I was talking about Possessed by the Night in this book because I think I was the first person to mix horror into the erotic genre, thriller, because there was always like someone cheating on someone or blackmailing someone or someone murdering someone. And I kind of fell into that with Inner Sanctum. And I said, I don't understand why all these people are falling into bed with each other, because I was a Hollywood director. I said, this never happened to me. And so I said, there should be a reason why people are doing things that they would not normally do. So I went through a bunch of different things in that script. That script went through a few. First, it was first it was like an incense burner. It was a dragon, like an oriental dragon, and this incense smoke would come out of its mouth, and that would drive people crazy. And then we thought, well, I thought that wasn't enough. So then we thought, okay, we're going to make it. It was going to be a baby, a pickled fetus in a jar, like from a sideshow, a deformed, like a baby in a jar. And we made it, the baby, and its head would pulse, and it was possessing people. And then everybody, we made it. They made the baby in the jar, and everybody was kind of like freaked out. And I said, okay, fine. So then we had to make this indescribable thing in a jar. And then the producer came in and he said, it's too indescribable. I said, okay. So I said to the makeup people, can you put an eye in the middle of it? And they said like this, and they put a fold in there and they stuck an eye. And everybody went, yeah, I like that. I said, okay. So then we had the guy go to a Chinese store, and there was this thing in a jar from a sideshow. And we don't know what it was. I never said what it was, but it had an influence. And I'll tell you, though, that ending where Shannon Tweed started pulling the trigger and everybody, the bullet holes were flying out of everybody, was getting shot and killed, and Chad McQueen, and he killed Henry Silva. And it was a very bloody ending. It was a very gory, very bloody ending, and very much unlike, I never watched these films, to be honest with you. I never watched Jack Mundra's movies. I never watched anybody's films. They're not the type of films that I would watch. So I never saw what other people were doing unless I had to look at Night Eyes or something. I would look up very quickly at these things, but I only tried to make my own films. And if the producer was happy, I was happy, but I didn't study. I never studied other people's erotic films, and I wasn't a fan of them. And if you saw Inner Sanctum 2, Inner Sanctum 2 was a zombie movie. You know what I mean? And I mean, we were killing people with meat hooks, and, Sandal Bergman and David Warner. And it was almost a horror film. And Mind Twister was the same sort of thing. I tried to take what I liked in horror movies and move it into the erotic thriller so that I had a reason to get up and go to work every morning. You know what I mean? There's got to be some reason why I want to get up and go to work. And so, I enjoyed Possessed by the Night because it was so strange. It was such a weird, strange movie. And if you've seen there's a Blu-ray of Bikini Drive-In, a movie called Bikini Drive-In. And what I did on Bikini Drive-In is I put all the things in my life that had nowhere to go. I put them on that Blu-ray. All the 35 millimeter bloopers and outtakes from Possessed by the Night and Inner Sanctum 1 and 2 are on that Blu-ray. So all the outtakes of Possessed by the Night are on the Blu-ray of Bikini Drive-In. So there's some pretty good stuff in there.
First, we need you that in the final picture, you show the boots because everybody needs to know that. Dude, you made me the happiest man. I need to tell you before I let Jhon. When I watched Possessed by the Night, I was so young. And I was, of course, because I was so young, with the volume very lower, and I started watching the movie. It blew my mind because, yeah, so sexy, but yeah, the horror, I was feeling like horrified, but I moved. And I want to tell you something. My ex-girlfriend thanks you because everything I love about women learned watching that movie. I watch every year. It's my favorite. It's so erotic, and Sandal Berman is the most beautiful woman in the world. And Inner Sanctum is a masterpiece, but I will let Jhon.
Sandal Bergman, I learned a few things from her myself on that show. There was a very funny scene on there where she kept saying, and I said, here's what I need you to do. I want you to do this, and then this, and then I'll come up here and I'll do this. And she said, I don't get it. I said, well, you turn here, and I'll come over here, and then we'll come over here, and then we'll get down over your shoulder. And she goes, could you just show me? And she's sitting there with no clothes on. And I said, all right, fine, fine. Look. And I got on this bed with her and I said, this is what you do. You do this. And she said, okay. And then you do this. And she roll over and do this and this and this. And finally, I said, okay, fine. The next night I went to the lab and I'm watching the dailies on the big screen. And there was the film of me on the bed with her naked. And she's on top of me and rolling over and they had done is they had played this trick on me. And when she got on top of me, they turned the camera on and very quietly they had filmed me as a joke while she was on top of me rolling around this bed. And all my bosses were sitting in this theater watching me roll around to this bed with this naked girl, Sandal Bergman, on top of me. It was very embarrassing. So anyway, that was my life.
Bueno, my next question is, tell me your the experience is the top productions, Abner's, The Invisible Dot, and Superchannel.
Abner was a children's film, and I did that with Andrew Stevens, the star of who's Stella Stevens' son, who was in the Night Eyes movies and was in a lot of films, horror films and stuff in the 70s and 80s. He owned a company, and it was a movie for being financed by a French company, and they insisted that the dog be an English sheepdog, and there weren't any English sheepdogs that were trained for the movie industry in Los Angeles. So they had to bring an English sheepdog from San Diego to Los Angeles. And the dog wasn't trained at all. It wouldn't sit still for more than 2 or 3 seconds at a time. And it was very difficult to get the dog to do anything. So I finally I went online and I bought a sheepdog Halloween costume. And I made my son, who was a little boy at the time, I made him put the costume on, and I paid him $60 a day to wear the sheepdog costume. And I made him play the dog whenever it's under the table and you see the dog, that's my little boy wearing a sheepdog costume. And fortunately, the dog went invisible after a while, so then that made it a little easier. When the dog is talking, the voice is by an actor named Mark Lindsay Chapman, who played Dr. Arcane in Swamp Thing, the TV series. And he was the villain of the Swamp Thing TV series. And the old lady, the grandmother in the movie was a woman named Jane Keene, and she played Trixie on The Honeymooners with Jackie Gleason. And that's why we hired her. We had 2 choices. It could either be Jackie Josephs from the original Little Shop of Horrors, or it could be Jane Keene from The Honeymooners. So I went with Jane Keene, and the movie, I think, turned out very well, and it was a big hit and made a lot of money, and it was a fun show to make. But other than that, there wasn't anything too exciting, you know. I didn't change the world, you know, in doing it. Super Shark was a movie I made myself. I raised the money and I owned the movie. And it was one of those summers where I didn't have a job. And so I decided I would make my own movie. So I called my friends and I said, I want to make this movie. Does anybody want to go in on it with me? And I raised a very small amount of money, maybe $90,000. And I got some people to come in and contribute their services. I got the script and the producing and the directing and the CGI shark effects. And I got all that deferred. So I think the final film budget was somewhere in the neighborhood of about $170,000 to $220,000. And I made it in 6 days. And I made it the Directors Guild of America. I made it Screen Actors Guild. And I had a wonderful cast. John Schneider from Dukes of Hazzard. And Jimmy J.J. Walker from a TV show called Good Times, I think he played, the kid that used to say dynamite. And it was a real fun show to make. Like I said, it was like a real Roger Corman special. It only had a 6-day schedule. But as it turned out, it was a great movie. And we did really well. It took us 5 years to get our money back. And everybody got about 30% profit on their money, which is pretty good. In this business of independent filmmaking, to get your money back at all and 25 or 35%, we're still making money on the show. We're still doing well. And we just got our rights back. So the rights to the movie just came back to me. So I'm just starting to remarket it all over again. So Super Shark was one of those success stories where you go out and you make your own movie with your own money and you succeed and you do well. And so I'm not going to make any more shark movies. I've made Jersey Shore Shark Attack, and which had a big cast. I was a producer of that. And I made Super Shark, and I think that's enough sharks for me. I'm in Florida. You don't think it's hot and humid here? It's hot. It's hot out there. I got an alligator. I got an alligator in my backyard.
Well, I got only 20 cats here in my house.
Bueno, la última es cómo define su trabajo en una palabra y agradecerle por todo el cine que ha hecho, porque nosotros los hemos disfrutado, los amantes del terror.
Well, I mean, we made a movie called The Tomb back in the early 80s with an actor named Craig Hammond was one of the actors. He was a friend of Quentin Tarantino's. I guess they were friends. And then I made a movie called Bad Girls from Mars. Mm-hmm. And I didn't know, but somebody said, oh, there's this guy visiting the set, and his name was Quentin Tarantino. And that was fine. And they said he was observing and then he worked in a video store. And then Craig Hammond said, could we borrow your camera? Now, the camera I had, believe it or not, was the same camera, not the same one, but the same kind of camera I had filmed the brain leeches with. It was the Oricon sound on film. There was the big Mickey Mouse magazine that filmed and recorded sound on the stripe on the side. But I'd gotten this one from Stereo Vision when I worked at the 3D company where we did Parasite and Metal Storm and those 3D movies. Now, you didn't have to record sound on film. It would run with a separate, sound machine. If you wanted to use a Nagra, you could use it. It would run sync sound. I used it on Evil Spawn, and we just ran a Nagra. I never used it with a stripe on the side on this camera. But I traded the people at Stereo Vision. I traded them a Bolex and traded them for this Oricon. So I had the Oricon. And Craig Hammond and them said, could we borrow this camera to make our movie, this movie we want to make? And it was an out-of-date camera. Nobody should have used it, but it was free. And another couple of filmmakers borrowed it and made features with it too. At least 2 or 3 people would come to me and borrow this camera because I would loan it to them for free. Because I know what it was like to have no money. I know what it was like to want to make a movie and have nothing. And I said, if you want it, you can have it. So they borrowed the camera and they made this movie. And then they brought the camera back and they said, thank you. And they gave me the camera back. And I know they're on YouTube. There's a Quentin Tarantino at the British Film Institute, the BFI. And at about the 7-minute mark, he sits there and he says that he borrowed the camera from me and he made the movie. And I'm glad, that he's given me a shout out a couple times. And, but he did kind of rib me, and he made a novelization of Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. And he kind of gave me a jab in his novel, but that's okay. I'll let that go. Because it tickled my kids. So
it's okay. And the question that Jhon made, try to define your career in one word.
That's tough. I would say, if in one word, perseverance.
Yeah. And in Spanish sounds beautiful. Sounds perseverancia. Beautiful.
Sí.
June 21st on Amazon.
I will tell John that this interview get uploaded before John. El junio 21 va a salir el libro. Intenta subir la entrevista antes. ¿Listo? Fred, the camera is yours, so you can sell your social media so people can follow you. Send a big hi to Colombia.
Well, hello, Jenner, and hello to the people of Colombia. And I don't know if you get my Christmas movies, but I'm still making movies. And if you do get them, be on the lookout for A Royal Christmas Ballet coming this Christmas.
Jhon is one of the biggest watchers of Christmas movies. And I will tell Jhon, él sigue haciendo películas de Navidad y ese es el nombre de la nueva que va a hacer. Estate pendiente porque yo sé que a ti te fascinan las películas de Navidad.
Thank you very much.
Oh,
Thanks
thank
to
you
you,
very
man.
much, Fred.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye, man.
No, bye bye, Fred.
Cheers.
You're the best.